Alright, guys, welcome to week 3 review. So, to get us started, I want us to orient ourselves, right? So, we're looking at the abdominal wall, right? And before I even start this, I want to preface that this is a supplementary resource. This is not meant to replace your time in lecture, lab, or office hours. I will say that every single video because I really want you guys to understand that if you depend on solely the videos I'm making, you will not do well in this class, right? This is meant to be holistic, so you need to go to all the resources that we offer to make sure you can get an understanding that is suitable enough to do well in your quizzes, your exams, and in the class in general, right? So, on that note, let's get started, right? So, we're looking at the abdominal wall, right? So, the first layer of the abdominal wall that we are familiar with, that we have to get ourselves acquainted with, is the rectus sheath, right? So, once the rectus sheath is removed, right? So, these two layers, once you remove the rectus sheath, right? So, this is the layer over your abs, right? Or your rectus abdominis. Sorry. Yeah, or your rectus abdominis. I don't know why I said sorry, but yes. The rectus sheath is the layer over the rectus abdominis. Rectus abdominis, right? Six pack. Rectus abdominis. Right? So once the rectus sheath is removed, you can see your rectus abdominis. Right? And the way it is on the donors, we still have the rectus sheath, some portions of it still intact, right? Just enough for you to see the rectus abdominis. Okay, and then the next muscle that we're going to be looking at is the external oblique. Again, external, it has that V shape going with the striation patterns that are moving in the lateral direction. So external oblique, right? And once we remove external oblique, we can see internal oblique, right? So internal oblique has those striation patterns that are moving more medially, right? So moving towards the midline of the body. So internal oblique. And once you remove those, we can see transverse abdominis, right? These muscles right here, transverse abdominis. Transversus abdominis, sorry. Transversus abdominis, right? It's moving in the transverse plane, left and right, and it's on the lateral sides of your body, lateral sides of your abdominal wall, right? So, transversus abdominis. All right, so I'm going to go to a different. I'm going to go to a different image. I'm trying to find the image where you guys can clearly see the inguinal canal, right? So there's a lot going on in these images, but I want you to understand that the inguinal canal is in this general area. Inguinal canal, right? Inguinal canal, right? So when you see the donor and you look more towards the pelvic region, right? You can see the inguinal canal. As for the spermatic cord and the round ligament, I couldn't find it on these donors, but we're going to move on these images. Sorry, we're going to move to the peritoneum now. So if I do find it, I'll show it later in the video, but I don't think that it's present on these 3D images. So now we're going to move into the peritoneum. Alright, so now that we're looking at the peritoneum, right, so we have the parietal peritoneum, right, surrounding the abdominal wall and all the abdominal organs, right, so the parietal peritoneum. Once you remove that, we can see the visceral peritoneum, right, that's attached to the liver, attached to the stomach, right, right, and then we have two other layers of peritoneum. So we have the greater omentum, right, which covers all or most of the abdominal organs, right? Right, most of the abdominal organs, or most of these, more better said, most of the small and large intestine, right? And then you have your lesser omentum, right? Lesser omentum. right? So greater omentum, lesser omentum. Now we're going to move on to the abdominal organs. Right? These other things you don't need to know. So we're going to move on to the stomach. Right? So this is the stomach here. We have the fundus of the stomach on top, right? Fundus on the top. And then we have the body of the stomach. And then we have moving into the pyloric sphincter, right? Right? That's that structure right there. So I'm going to examine just so we can see. This is the pyloric sphincter. I don't know why well, never mind. Yeah. So pyloric sphincter. Okay. Now I'm going to show you the greater and lesser curvature of the stomach. So greater curvature of the stomach, right? Right. This edge of the stomach right here, that's larger than this region, right? So greater curvature, lesser curvature of the stomach. And I already showed you the pyloric sphincter. I'm going to show you a real donor image just to make sure that you can understand this better. So I'm going to let me move that out here. So we have the stomach. Okay. We have the stomach. We have the fundus of the stomach, right? In this general region, fundus. And then we have the body of the stomach, and then we have the pyloric sphincter is right here, right? Right? And the pyloric sphincter is the point where food is going from the stomach and then moving into the small intestine, right? And that would be the duodenum, which is the first portion of the small intestine. So, right, so the pyloric sphincter is that turning point from the stomach to the duodenum, right? And the layers of the small intestine, we have duodenum, jejunum, and then we have ileum. So in saying that, the duodenum is only about 10 inches, and then the rest of the small intestine is split into the jejunum and the ileum. So let me bring up a better image for you guys. Peritoneum, right? So this is the small intestine. Right, so jejunum would be more towards the superior side, right? On the higher side, right? It would be more superior, and ileum would be more inferior, right? Here, you have the ileum, 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 right? And then we have here the cecum, right? Cecum is here. Right attached to the cecum, we have the appendix, right? Ooh. Let me move this away, right? So more towards the cecum. So we have the cecum here, we have the appendix, and I'm going to remove the cecum and the appendix just so that we can see the ileocecal valve. Ooh, solid, let me make that solid. Okay. Alright, so we have the ileum, ileum, ileum. And the ileum moves into the ileocecal valve. I don't think we can see it on this imaging, but I'm pretty sure the ileocecal valve would be right here, right? So that's the transitioning point from the small intestine into the large intestine. Right? So once we have that, I can then show you the colon, right? So the cecum is the point where we know that we're in the colon. So, knowing that, I'm going to bring up another diagram. I know I have to keep going back and forth just to make sure that I have the right orientation. But so we have the cecum, right? So the cecum goes into the ascending colon. So let me hide this. the ascending colon, and once we're in the ascending colon, now we're in the transverse colon, right? Transverse colon, transverse colon, transverse colon, transverse colon, and then now we're over here, we're in the descending colon. Let me remove this, let me remove this. So now we're in the descending colon. So descending colon, and then once we hit this S shape here, we're in the sigmoid colon. And from the sigmoid colon, that brings us into the rectum, right? And then the anal canal, and then the food is outside of your body, right? So, with that being said, so we have a general orientation for the abdominal organs of the small and large intestines. I can bring a better image just so we can see. I can try to find one and see if there is one, but usually the abdominal, usually in the abdominal region, the transverse colon would be somewhere here, right? But it's going down here. But you know, no need to worry. We have the ascending colon, transverse colon, ascending colon, transverse colon, and then once we're here, we're moving into the ascending, sigmoid, and then we go into the rectum and then the anal canal. But with that being said, we're going to move into the last portion of this content sheet, which is the accessory organs. Alright, now that we have the stomach removed, now I want to show you guys the accessory organs. Of course, you know this big structure is the liver, right? So this big structure is the liver. Let me remove these things here, move these other muscles here. Okay. So we know that this big structure here is the liver. I just removed the left lobe, right? This is the right lobe of the liver. And then now this is the caudate lobe. And I removed the quadrate lobe already. So liver split into right, left, caudate, and quadrate. Now we can see the gallbladder here, the gallbladder, and then the pancreas, right? So the pancreas, you can see the head of the pancreas here, the body of the pancreas, and the tail of the pancreas. Right, so we can remove that. And we see the spleen up here. Right, this thing is the spleen right next to the liver. And I'm going to take out a image of just the liver. Right. So you have the liver, the right lobe, left lobe, and we have the caudate lobe in the back, and then we have the quadrate lobe on the bottom, right? And this structure here is the falciform ligament. So I bring it up again just so we can see it. Remember that the visceral peritoneum is directly adhered to the liver, right? And then we have the falciform ligament right here. Falciform ligament, right? If I remove this here, right? The falciform ligament. So don't worry about the structures or the names that you see on Anatomy TV, but just remember that the falciform ligament is here. Right, the falciform ligament. Okay. And I think that is it. Besides that, we have Bear's area, right? So Bear's area would be here, right? This region right here. This is Bear's area, right? The layer where there's no peritoneum on the surface of the liver. It's just bare. Okay, and that is it. For sphygmatic cord and round ligament, I still wasn't able to find the structure. So for now, that is it for week 3. I hope you guys enjoyed this and this was a useful resource. Have a good rest of your week, guys.